our speaker is a real coup for a group in a small town in Iowa, as Mike Tremont has served as the 2024 Libertarian Party nominee for Vice President of the United States. He's a former White House economist, entrepreneur, and economics professor. He retired from an 11-year career as a police officer. He feels the goals of libertarians, which include being fiscally conservative, promoting limited government, military restraint in overseas conflicts, and personal liberty, are best served by working inside the Republican Party instead of going through an independent third party. His group, called Republican Liberty Caucus, is recruiting other Libertarian Party members to influence policy choices from inside the Republican Party. So may I introduce to you the head of the Republican Liberty Caucus, our speaker, Mike Tremont.
Thank you. That was awfully nice. It's actually a real coup for me to be able to speak to you for a kid from the suburbs of Chicago. It's a lot of fun to be with you. I'm sorry about all the snow. And I know that when I say that to you, what I mean is I'm sorry the snow is disappearing. I know that you're just looking forward to the next snowstorm. I got in town a few days ago. It was snowing as I rolled in, so I guess you could figure out which day that was. It's all a blur to me at this point. Only metaphorically, not literally. It's a blur because when I rolled in, the snow was so bad I could not get into the parking lot of the hotel. And it was only a few inches, but it was, steep. You guys know something about steep driveways, as I understand. I rolled up here about an hour ago, and I thought, Barbara told me, go up the steep little driveway. It's cleared off. You're going to be fine. And that's your first clue. When someone tells you the road's been cleared off, you're going to be fine. That's a red flag, right? Because I spent 20 years, most of the last 20 years in Florida. We don't tell people the driveway is going to be fine, right? You don't have to. Okay, so Barbara says the driveway is going to be fine. So I come down the road. I see the driveway. I see the house. I see the sign. I'm in the right place. There's a car. I don't know who it is. Someone's sitting here right now. Can't make it up the driveway. Blocking me. I'm like, oh, Barbara, I don't know what you mean by you're going to be fine. But so I just parked my truck over there. I hope that's okay. If it's towed, it's towed. It's not worth very much money. Look, I need to clear up a little bit of confusion, my fault, not yours, about who I am and why I'm here. Not that that necessarily matters. I am the least interesting part of this presentation, okay? I don't set the bar that high. This is not about me. But to clarify, yes, Barbara's correct. I've been inside the Libertarian Party for quite some time. I was the party's vice presidential nominee last year. Someone had to do it, right? Someone had to do it. I started in the Republican Party a long while ago. I worked for the White House in 91, 92. I campaigned for George Herbert Walker Bush. Tammy, ask your parents. Somebody explain it to Tammy. And I worked for other candidates in the Republican Party, Bob Dole and George W. I see a little bit of gray hair around here. You all know what I'm talking about. Okay. Those of you with gray hair are also going to recognize the following line. Read my lips, no new taxes. Oh boy. Now, if you're a youngster, as we all were in those days, except for some of us that weren't born yet, but we were young in those days. I grew up as sort of a fiscally conservative economist, banker. You get the idea. When he says, read my lips, no new taxes, you're like, oh, he's your guy, right? He is your guy. The legacy of Ronald Reagan lives on. Beer is going to be colder, and food tastes better, and colors are brighter. It's just a happy time. And then what does he do? He goes and he agrees to new taxes. Okay, when you're 28, that's a big deal, right? Today, when we look back on that, it seems quaint to even think that we would have believed him in the first place. Go an inch farther back, 1974. I was 13 in 1974, if I'm doing the math right. I can't actually remember that far back. You know you're getting on in years. Someone back me up here. You know you're getting on in years when you do the math to figure out how old you were in a certain year, right? Because you can't actually remember, right? Somebody says 1974, how old were you? Okay, I was born in 61, so I'm 13. I was 13, 1974. I was the last human on Earth to believe that Richard Nixon had not broken the law. It was I was old enough to know what that meant, right? You know, if you're 8, it doesn't count. At 13, you know right, wrong, you know the law, you know, basically when one of your friends is lying to you, you understand what's on TV. You're barely old enough to know what's going on. I refuse to believe that he could have broken the law, that there was a cover-up. I didn't even believe there was a burglary. Of course, you know, when you're 13, you probably don't even remember, you probably don't even believe that the Democratic Party would have an office in the Watergate Hotel. But never mind that. I have a long history of being duped. Remember what W said. You know, shame on you, fool me once, he got it all mixed up. But you remember the point, right? The point is, if you've been duped before, you take it to heart, now you're pissed off, right? Now you're just absolutely pissed off. 1992, I quit my job in the White House because, let's be honest, there's no way George Herbert Walker Bush is not winning re-election. It's like taking candy from a baby. Go to work for the campaign. This is going to be the easiest transition anyone has ever made. We find a way to lose the election. Find a way. Okay, now I've just given up this cush job to work for peanuts for the entire 1992, and I'm unemployed. Pregnant wife, this is a tough situation, right? A number of years later, I campaigned for W in Texas to get to know some of the folks. He starts running for president. Do you want to join that team? No. There's no way the Bush family is going to trick me again. Right? No way. They tricked me twice. Shame on me. Shame on you. I don't even know the saying, but I'm not having it. There's no way that guy is going to become president of the United States. Once you've been tricked, it hurts. Am I right? All right. We left the Libertarian Party, and by we I mean my campaign team and I, this past summer to rejoin the Republican Party. Because we believe the Republican Party is the only game in town. It's where our heart and soul has always been. We left because we were pissed. Just keeping it real, just keeping it honest. We were pissed. We come back 14 years later. I joined the Republican Liberty Caucus, which is a part of the Republican Party. Not legally part of it. I need to be careful how I speak. It's a group inside the Republican Party. I joined it with a team of 45 people. And we decided it was going to be our job to let folks know that we ought to have chapters in the states, because there weren't very many chapters. There's a chapter in Texas, and a chapter in Florida, and a few others. But there's no chapter in Iowa. That's a problem. That's why I'm here. That's a problem. Why does this matter? Why am I here? Ostensibly, the immediate reason I'm here is to tell you about the Republican Liberty Caucus, and I am eventually going to tell you about the caucus. But you have to pay the price first. Before I tell you about the caucus, you got to sit through my little spiel. The reason I am here is because I think it matters. I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff you already know. As a matter of fact, if I tell you anything that you don't recognize, we're having a communication problem, right? I have no interest in teaching you something that you don't already know. As a matter of fact, it's unlikely I know anything that you don't already know. So please, don't expect some lightning bolt to come out of my head and all of a sudden we're all going to be smarter. That's not going to happen, okay? Let's be candid. We all, in some sense, feel that things are coming to a head. You've been watching this for a while. I would argue that the great battle of our time, and by our time, I would mean the last 250 years, is coming to a head. And I plan to win. And I think a lot of you plan to win also, or die trying. I'm going to go down swinging if I lose. Swinging and annoying if I lose. On one side of this battle is the idea that our rights do not come from the government. The way I was raised, they come from God. You do you, but they don't come from the government. We advocate for a limited government. We advocate for individual responsibility and individual freedom. We advocate for a government whose job it is to do nothing but protect our rights. We don't ask much else from the government. The government rarely does even that well. Don't ask it to do anything else. Some folks might call this the beginning of a liberal democracy. Some people might call it American republicanism. Call it what you want. That's one side of the debate. The other side of the debate is the idea that we need an activist government, that a government defines our roles, defines our rights, and will go so far as to redistribute our wealth, our assets, our assignment, our purpose in life. That's the other side of the debate. I grew up as an economist, so I thought, feel free to laugh at me, I thought this debate began with Adam Smith, right? 1776, wealth of nations, people make free choices. The world works better when people make individual choices. It's more efficient. The economy grows. That's a good thing, right? This is half of what we would call libertarianism. The idea that the world works better, the economy is more efficient, we all make more money if everyone makes decisions on their own. I'm going to offer you a thought experiment to illustrate how dumb I was to think that libertarianism and liberty and freedom is based on nothing but economic efficiency. Here's my thought experiment. This is going to be, of all the weird things you've heard libertarians say, and I know you've heard a lot of weird things said by libertarians, the following is the strangest. Imagine for 1 minute, if you would, that free markets don't work. Imagine that Adam Smith was wrong, that Milton Friedman was wrong, that we were all, Ronald Reagan was wrong. We've all been wrong about how free markets work. Imagine that socialism works better. Use your imagination. It's a thought experiment, okay? It's a thought experiment. Imagine we could all get richer if the government would make decisions for us. Imagine. You all have friends that aren't that smart, so you could imagine the government making some decisions better than some people in some circumstances. Imagine that just across the blanket, supercomputers and smart people in government, AI, use whatever imagination element you want. Okay. Here's the question. You ready for the question? In such a world in which socialism works better than free markets, better than capitalism, better than democracy, better than individual responsibility, in this world, is it ethical to let the government make decisions for you? You'll be better off, you'll be healthier, you'll be richer, colors will be brighter, food will taste better, beer will be colder. Do you want the government to be making decisions for you? The answer has to be no, because it's not just a matter of efficiency. It's not just a matter of getting rich. And I've got no problem I haven't done it myself, but I hope everyone is, working very hard at getting rich. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. But there's more to life than just an efficient economy. The way I was raised, not only is it not ethical for the government to take decision-making away from you, it's not ethical for you to cede authority over your life to someone else. Least of all the government. If I'm going to have someone make decisions for my life, it's going to be Nancy, my wife, right? I resent the idea that the federal government should think that it's as smart as Nancy is. I mean, sure, the federal government is smarter than I am, but smarter than my wife, that's setting the bar too high. Do not cede authority for your life to someone else, unless you absolutely have to, and if you have to, don't make it the federal government, right? Of all the people you would pick out to make decisions for you, let that be at the bottom of the list. Okay, 1776. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution soon follows. I would go so far as to argue, and I have online, and you'd be amazed how much pushback I get for saying this in social media. The most important invention of our species was the American Constitution.
Amen.
I want that to sink in so that you can argue with me about it later. You're cute with the wrinkles right here. Most important, I'm going to say it again because right now you're thinking, he's an idiot, he didn't actually mean that, right? Most important invention of our species was the American Constitution. Because it was from that setup that allowed everything else to come from it. And not just in this country. Remember that every other democracy around the world styles itself after us. That's the good news and the bad news. The good news is, of course, that we have done very well. We have, although the last few years wouldn't suggest it's likely to last, we have arguably the most free and open society in the world. We have the highest standard of living. We have the greatest income per capita. We have the most advanced technology and the best setup for further future investment in the United States. This is the big push that President Trump is making, and he's got a good argument to make. Everyone wants to invest in the United States. Everybody wants to invest in the United States. The combination of our Constitution, which allowed individual freedom to flourish, in combination with the Western frontier that set up this American idealistic view of an entrepreneurial spirit, the idea that we could overcome problems, the idea that we had problems to overcome, in combination with the American experience of immigration, which has made us the most culturally and racially tolerant society in the world by far. I want you to think about who, for all of the complaining that we have in this country about how intolerant and racist we are, and I'm not suggesting that we all don't have our moments when we're intolerant. I have a moment all the time. I'm not suggesting we're a perfect people. But just for a moment, against that backdrop, I want you to think about who is in second place. I've traveled all around the world. I don't know who's in second place in terms of cultural tolerance, but it's a distant second, whoever it is. That comes from the American experience in immigration. The combination of these elements has created a nation that's not just a little different from everybody else, but significantly different. So when I say this is the good news and the bad news, what I mean is the bad news is that if this doesn't work out, we're screwed. And when I say we, I mean as a species. The responsibility is enormous. There are people who want us to fail. I don't mean weird politicians in the United States, although there probably are a few of those too. Vladimir Putin makes it a point of telling people who will listen that he believes that democracy will fail, that democracy doesn't work, that his style of government works better. And when he says that, he doesn't just mean, you know, I'm a badass autocrat and I like sitting on top of the heap and everybody does whatever the hell I tell them to do. That is an element of it, I'm sure. But what he means is democracy doesn't function very well. And it's his plan to outlast it. If our democracy doesn't work out, we will have taught the world that he was right. And for 100 years. Because I want you to think about what is the second leading democracy? I don't know, that also takes a minute, right? What's the second most important currency in the world? What's the second most important military in the world? What's the second most free society in the world? These are distant seconds. Distant seconds. You can't even think of it off the top of your head. It's not a close competition. If our government doesn't work well over the next generation, we will have messed it up for our kids, their kids, their kids, not just here, but around the world. Enormous responsibility. So, now, you might think, well, this big debate, in essence, we've won. Free markets have lifted the entire world out of abject poverty, almost uniformly. If there's anything that an economist can share with the rest of the world, let it be this. Poverty is a political construct. Famine, abject poverty that you cannot climb out of, right? That is a political construct that we see in other countries. But rarely do we see it in the United States. It exists around the world because of bad governance, because of the absence of democratic principles, because of the absence of personal responsibility allowed by the government, because the government is too intrusive, because the government interrupts how free markets work. That's where poverty comes from on this planet. It's a political construct. If we have done such a good job lifting the world out of poverty, if we have raised the standard of living so high, we have proven that Marx was wrong. We have outlived the Soviets. We defeated Nazis. We won the American Revolution. We ended slavery, which was hard. We've had all this. One might be forgiven for thinking, well, we won. What is there left to do? Let me point out that there are at least 3 categories of threats to our society today that are already on the railroad tracks. The first is a financial collapse of the federal government. If we continue spending money the way we do, the federal government will not be able to make its payments in a period of time much less than 20 years. Some economists say it could be as soon as 6 or 7 years. I wouldn't be quite that pessimistic, but as I've already pointed out, I'm wrong about most things. Maybe it could be sooner. But certainly, by the middle of this century, the federal government of the United States, on the track that it's on, is going to fail. It's going to fail financially. If and when the federal government of the United States fails in a financial sense, it would obviously immediately bring down the U.S. Treasury security and bond markets. That would cause a collapse in the corporate bond market. This would bring down equity markets. It would bring down the value of the dollar, which would collapse. There is no other currency in the world that could be used in its stead as ubiquitously and as efficiently. And so it would cast the entire world into a deep depression, and probably for multiple generations. That's how important it is, what we're discussing. And it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when right now. And our politicians are doing what about it? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Category number 2, a military confrontation. The reason that this is possible to get into a military confrontation that's hard to get out of is for a couple different reasons. One is that more weird places have nuclear weapons than ever before. And we get into a lot of military conflicts. It's sort of a law of large numbers type of argument. Any one particular conflict seems really unlikely to wind up in a nuclear war, right? If I told you, in 2 years, we're going to end up in a nuclear war because of invading Venezuela, you'd say, ooh, that's weird. Yeah, I don't see that happening, right? What are the chances of getting into Iraq or Afghanistan and that turning into a nuclear war? Unlikely, right? Unlikely. We got in, we got out. But we seem to engage in military conflict over and over and over and over. If the chances of each one are only 1 in 20, you're good to go, right? Not if you do it 20 times. the chances of getting into a military conflict and finding it difficult to get out of without irritating a nuclear power, the chances of that happening are increasing. Per conflict, not to mention the fact that we're getting into conflicts all the time. It seems to me unlikely that China's going to put up a fight over Venezuela. That the Russians can't. They're too occupied, right? It seems unlikely to me that we're going to get into a nuclear exchange over Israel and Gaza. That doesn't strike me as very likely. It doesn't strike me as likely that we're going to get into a nuclear exchange over Ukraine with Russia, right? That seems unlikely. But if I told you, I want to use the word impossible, you would say, you're full of crap, right? Don't tell me it can't happen, right? You're having a diplomatic meltdown with a nuclear power. Don't tell me it's impossible. So how many more decades do you think we can go spinning the wheel? I don't know the answer to that. And that's a problem. The third category of threat to our democracy is this idea that we are so split as a nation that we end up in some sort of civil discord, civil disobedience, civil demonstration that prompts a reaction from an autocratic or authoritarian government. Imagine a government that did not do a very good job minding its P's and Q's and decided to send in the National Guard every time we saw conflict like we saw in 2020. Imagine a series of riots that are actually worse than 2020 and a reaction from the government that was worse. Imagine the imposition of martial law. And imagine that didn't go very well. Does it go better or does it go worse in the future because we've had the experience with COVID? I don't know the answer to that. I think there's two lessons coming out of the COVID regime. One, I think we as a people have learned that with the right communication strategy, the government can convince you of some pretty weird stuff and get you to do some pretty weird stuff. Number two, I think the government has learned that with the right communications campaign, they can get you to do some pretty weird stuff and convince you of some the same lesson. But we've learned not to let it happen. The government has learned, I'm pretty good at this. I could potentially do that all over again. Is the possibility, again, you might have to ask your folks, but Kent State, when we watched Kent State in the late 60s, it was ugly. It made us cry. But at no point, be honest, at no point watching that black and white TV did you think that was going to spiral out of control and it was going to bring a crash to the federal government of the United States. Wouldn't cross your mind. If I asked you today to believe me when I said it remains impossible for a conflict to spiral out of control, you would say that's not true. I could not convince you that a civil war is impossible. I could not convince you that it is impossible that somebody's National Guard and somebody's regular military in some state in this country is going to end up in a conflict at some point. I could not convince you that that is not a possibility. Each of these three categories of threats to our democracy is a leftover. It's a distant great-great-grandchild of the debate that we've been having for 250 years about what type of government we want to have. The reason we're in so much debt, the reason we're split as a nation, the reason we are in so much armed conflict is because we have a government that is completely unresponsive to the underlying ethics of the American people. This is not a matter of just free markets and making the world work more efficiently. This is a matter of having a government that does not reflect who we are as a people. We all know that our politics has split into camps, right? We've got crazy people on the left and we've got crazy people on the right. And politicians seem to have an interest in allowing the craziness to go on. As long as they're convincing us to hate Democrats and convincing Democrats to hate us, they don't have to deal with what are we going to do about entitlement spending? What are we going to do about actually pursuing diplomacy around the world? What are we going to do to make sure that we don't end up in a civil war? These are huge issues that are very easy to look away from if you're very busy pointing out how stupid people are in a different political party. All of these problems come from the same place, an unresponsive government that has interests other than yours. Which is why I believe that it is true that our politics are broken. Our politics have broken into two different camps. In one camp are the crazies on the left, the crazies on the right, and a whole lot of other politicians who don't give a rat's ass what's on your agenda today. And in the other camp is us. It's everybody else. We can no longer tolerate a government that doesn't care about us. If we don't start doing things differently, these threats to our society will continue, because these are not things that are contingent on some weird thing happening. These are things that are going to happen to us unless we change them. So, our team joined the Republican Party. We joined the Republican Liberty Caucus. It is our feeling that it brings me no joy to say that the Democratic Party is out of the philosophical debate. I'm rooting for them. We all have friends who are Democrats. Most of my family are Democrats. If you join the Democratic Party believing in civil liberties, and this is a party that's going to stand up for your rights, right? And recognize the goodness as, as God infused in each of us, right? Those are the feelings that my Calvinist family had, my Lutheran family had when they joined the Democratic Party. That party has left you. That party has absolutely left you. The Democratic Party is no longer in the philosophical debate in this country. It will win elections again. It'll probably win the White House again. Maybe soon, for all I know. But it is out of the philosophical debate. The debate that's going to matter in this country is only one. And that's, how is the Republican Party going to define Donald Trump's legacy? Are we going to be a party that stands up for what I would argue are the basics that we all agree on? Adherence to the Constitution, fiscal conservatism, free markets, medical freedom. Something that now we realize we should have been talking about medical freedom starting 40 years ago, right? We're playing a little catch-up in terms of medical freedom. And a less militaristically interventionist foreign policy. These are the basics. These are the basics. If you had told a Republican 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 60 years ago, that you were going to have to tell people, let's focus on these things, that would seem strange, right? That would seem strange. Well, of course, those are our basic principles. Really? Really? You're going to tell me that all of our elected Republican officials would list those basic principles as what they focus on every day? I'm going to say no. No, it's not. If we focus on these basic principles, I think that our party goes in the right direction. There's another debate that says we can put up with more nationalism, more populism, and maybe even a little bit of authoritarianism to get what we want. We can shortcut the system. You cannot shortcut the system in the long run. And I understand the urge, the instinct to do so. As someone who believes in the vast majority of President Trump's agenda, right? I think most of us do. And, once in a while we grump about certain things on the edge. That's okay. But I think most of us believe in the vast majority of his agenda. In the long run, I would argue that we are not serving his agenda when we shortcut how we get there. And so in that sense, I fear that the president gets crappy staff work. I recognize crappy staff work. I used to work for the White House myself. It's okay for the President of the United States, for the chief executive of any organization, to make big, sweeping pronouncements, right? Get control over the border. Everybody agreed. Now, 100% of the Republican Party agreed. Something like 70% of the Democratic Party agrees. Got to get control over the border. It's okay to say we're a nation of laws. If you're here illegally, you got to go. Right? Everyone agrees. I shouldn't say everyone. I got to be careful. Not everyone. For the most part, we agree with that, especially at the basic principle level. We're a nation of laws. We recognize that legal immigration is good for us, but illegal immigration, I'm sorry, it's just not good for us. If you're here illegally, you got to go. Okay. It's not okay to execute on what the boss says in a way that undermines our Constitution. That's just one example. Just one example. And in that sense, I think the president doesn't get the best staff work. And I want to make sure that his agenda lives on in a way that's successful and in a way that continues in the future. Because we're not going to be done. Right? Even if the president has uber success over the next few years, we're not going to be done. We need to be able to pursue his agenda out after he's gone. And that's why the Republican Liberty Caucus exists, is to fight for these basic principles. This is why I believe that we need a chapter in Iowa, which we don't. I don't know why. I was busy doing stupid things in the Libertarian Party when our caucus here in the Republican Party was not hitting the ball out of the park, right? I don't know why we don't have a chapter in Iowa. I have, show and tell. I made this brochure. Now you're immediately going to be able to tell that I made this brochure myself. I showed this to someone a couple weeks ago. I was here in Iowa about a month ago. And someone said, oh, you know, my sixth grader could help you out with this. She meant it so, she was not busted. I mean, she was really, well, if you want, you know, I know. This is an ugly little brochure. I'm going to pass it around. I have a bunch of them. They're paid for. Take one if you want one. It's got my phone number on there. The brochure is not bad for an organization that doesn't exist yet. Okay, that's where I want you to set the bar, okay? The national brochure has red, white, and blue. It's gorgeous. It's got the names of the board members and photographs. It's a beautiful brochure, okay? Take my word for it. But we don't have a chapter in Iowa. So, this is a brochure for an organization that does not yet exist. In that sense, I think the brochure is pretty darn good, right? Thank you. Thank you. So, this is my show and tell. If you would like to get involved, and by getting involved, I'm not setting the bar too high here. I mean, if you'd like to become a member. Now, if you would like to serve on the board, I would love to see that. If we could get together a dozen people who would like to sit on the board, and we could find someone that wanted to help us out with some paperwork. It's not brain surgery. I've started a chapter myself in Virginia. If I can do it, trust me, you can do it. We believe, well, that's okay. We believe that having a chapter in as many states as possible is important because that's how we build relationships with local politicians, with state house representatives, your state senators, your county level, your dog catchers, right? Everyone who's not at the federal level. Because at the national board level, we take care of endorsements of congressmen and senators and maybe even a presidential candidate. But as far as what goes on inside of a state, I don't need to tell you all, that's important. And we can't do that if we don't have chapters in states. I hope that makes some sense. So that's where we are. So next week, do me a favor, look at the ugly brochure, get my phone number and text me and say, yes, I want to join the Republican Liberty